Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with your ideal list of the Mozart late symphonies. That is the last 6 of them, just to keep things manageable. Now, we've done lots of talks about Mozart symphonies. We've done complete symphony cycles. We've done the best late symphony sets, all 6 of them or so combined. But now we're going to talk about the last 6 individually. And as always with these ideal lists, the idea here is not to say that any particular performance is the best. It's rather to find a list that has no weak links, in which everything is terrific. And of course, with Mozart, since everybody and their mother conducts him, especially late Mozart symphonies, that should not be too difficult. And in fact, there is plenty of room for alternate selections, and that's where you come in, because I would like you to do what I do and come up with a list of 6 fabulous late Mozart symphony performances with no repeats of conductors. You have to have 6 different conductors. I mean, if they're doing the same orchestra or something, I don't care. But 6 different conductors. And I know we're going to get just a fantastic selection of all the best Mozart out there, because that's what we do together. We find all the best stuff. And so this is going to be a lot of fun because, you know, when I was a kid, back in the day, at the dawn of time, well, it wasn't the dawn of time, but you know what I mean. It was back in the day, in the 60s. The last 6 Mozart symphonies were the only ones that people listened to, basically. Eventually, Karl Böhm did the complete Mozart symphonies, which wasn't really complete. It was 41 of them. They're really 60-some odd if you take, opera overtures and multiple movements and things that come out of serenades and all kinds of other stuff. There are lots of ways to go about putting together a Mozart symphony. So it's really very, very interesting to see how the market has expanded. What really kind of did it, I think, was the Mozart year, which was, 1990, 1991? When did he die? I don't know. He died, I never remember if 91 or 92. He died, in 1791. So it was 1991 when the universe exploded with Mozart. And I'll never forget, I was hanging out in HMV, near Lincoln Center, the one on 72nd Street in Manhattan. And the Mozart section was just metastasizing. It was growing and growing and growing, especially with performances of early symphonies, which nobody ever listens to. And people still don't, by and large, not in the same way they listen to the late ones, although there are some lovely ones. And I remember, a woman came in and was sitting there speaking to friends in a recognizably Viennese accent. And I was talking to a friend of mine saying, I cannot believe how many duplicate recordings there are of these early Mozart symphonies. I mean, there's just tons and tons and tons of CDs. Who's buying this stuff? I was asking. And she butts her head into the conversation and she says to me, in a recognizably Viennese accent, I can't believe what I'm hearing. I cannot believe it. Mozart was Austria's most famous artist. And I said, no, he wasn't. And she said, well, who was? And I said, Hitler. Well, that stopped that conversation. And I thought it was, kind of funny. And she was sort of horrified. And, that's how the conversation ended. But the point I'm trying to make is that this proliferation of early Mozart has not necessarily been to his benefit, in my view. Mozart was an unbelievable prodigy. Let's not kid ourselves. He was incredible. But his early symphonies are not like Haydn's. Haydn's early symphonies all have their own individual personality, and you can't say that they're in any way immature. Now, Mozart was composing his early symphonies when he was still a zygote, so it was astonishing what he was doing. But they're not as interesting as a group. They don't start to get interesting really until he gets into his 20s. But there are always individual exceptions. And of course, the more you listen to them, the more interesting they get, because He was a great composer. But in general, his earlier symphonies are early compared to his later symphonies, which have all of that, Mozartean grace and melodic inspiration and compositional dexterity that we come to expect. And Mozart was not at heart a full-time symphonist the way Haydn was, because Haydn's job was to write symphonies. Mozart, who was essentially a freelancer for most of his life, wrote concertos for himself and operas for the rest of the world, and symphonies when he had to, or when there was a reason for it. That doesn't mean he worked any less at them or cared less about them, but he had less opportunity to really expand and experiment with the form. And so his last six, beginning with the Haffner Symphony, number 35, those are the great ones. The last six are 35, 36. Remember, there is no 37, 38, 39, 40, and 41. That adds up to six, even though I did this because 37 was in there. So 40 are the six symphonies, 35 to 41. Those are the great ones. And great they really are. Absolutely fabulous. They're his most mature symphonies. There's no shame. No shame. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise if those are the only ones that really interest you. Because there's a reason for it. There was a reason that everyone ignored all the rest of them for most of the past 200 years. And like I said, it's a question more than anything else of time. It's not entirely a question of quality. I mean, when you want to listen to something, the whole point of something being classical, it used to be, maybe not so much now, was that it was the best. It was the cream of the crop. And it was the cream of the crop of incredibly prolific composers as well. We say that Mozart's early symphonies don't have the same personality that Haydn's do, but let's not forget, had Mozart started writing symphonies at the same age that Haydn did, he would have only had 5 years to live, because Haydn was nearly 30 and Mozart was dead at 35. So, everybody has their own angle and unique story. But it really, really makes sense that if you want to just hear the best, these are the ones you're going to listen to. And it also makes sense, quite frankly, that if you're just starting out, if you're not a hardcore Mozartean or hardcore classical music person, you should start with the best, because those are going to be the ones that are most likely to float your boat, to get you interested, to be expressively meaningful. And so let's talk now about 6 different conductors conducting the last 6 Mozart symphonies. This will be my list, and I'm dying to see yours. It's going to be very, very interesting. I'm sure it will be. So I begin with number 35, the Haffner. This is the Haffner. The Haffner. That's how you remember what it is, by the way. Muti with the Vienna Philharmonic. Now, when I reviewed the big Muti box, I said that his skill as a conductor of Mozart symphonies has been terribly underrated. And these Philips recordings are gorgeous, which of course means they're probably out of print. In fact, most of these are probably out of print, but don't worry about it, because there are tons of things that are in print and they're always coming back. They're always coming and going and going and coming. I'm not going to finish that with the Mel Brooks line from, Lily von Stupp in Blazing Saddles. Anyway, this is a stunning Haffner symphony. It is absolutely beautiful. It is so wonderfully played, so gorgeously recorded, so sensitively conducted. And, the Haffner suffers from the fact that Mozart said that the last movement should be played as quickly as possible. Oh, what a mistake that has come down to us. Why? Because especially the period instrument folks rip into it like a bat out of hell. And it's nice. I mean, it's exciting when you do it like that, but it's not necessarily musical. You want it to go at a speed that allows your ear to take in all the detail. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be fast. That doesn't mean it shouldn't sound fast. But it does mean that it should not be a blur. as so many performances these days are. Well, this is just about perfect tempo-wise, and it's gorgeous. And you should have the Vienna Philharmonic do something in Mozart anyway. So that is my choice for the Haffner, Riccardo Muti, and there will be many, many others, I know. Now, number 36 is the Linz Symphony, and it is also an absolutely gorgeous work. It has, in its second subject, a sound, a sonority, bum bum ba da da dum bum bum ba dum. That's the second subject, and there's a wind chord in there for like trumpets and horns and oboes. I don't know how Mozart gets that sound. It's just one of those hallmarks of genius. It's so beautiful. And my choice for the Linz, this was a tough one. This was really a tough one, but it is Bruno Walter, largely for sentimental reasons, because, he made this recording of the Linz with a rehearsal disc, a big, long rehearsal disc on the first movement of the Linz Symphony primarily. And it's fun to hear him working with the Columbia Symphony and then recording the takes. And it's really a very honest and open study in how a great conductor got it done. And get it done he does. This is one of the most beautiful of all the stereo Bruno Walter Mozart recordings. Now, this is old-fashioned Mozart. It is big band. It is romantic. You hear him yelling at the violins to play with more espressivo. And why not? It's expressive music. It's supposed to be expressive. I mean, come on, folks. Express something with it. It's gorgeous. It's just beautiful and warm, and it's not slow, and it's not self-indulgent. It's just expressively gorgeous. And I have to say, I know that period instrument stuff is all the thing, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But it really, really, really does not have to come at the expense of expressivity. And I have a feeling that if you compared a modern orchestra to your gut strings and pointless harpsichord continuo and timpani with little woody sticks and all that, and to a performance which is singing and vocal and warm and emotionally meaningful, I have a pretty good idea which one Mozart would have preferred. And, I think that's sort of the bottom line, isn't it? So Bruno Walter is a name you have to know in Mozart. And so I really feel happy to include one of his performances. However, if I didn't put in this one, the one that I would have included as an alternative, and I'm going to tell you what it is anyway, is Colin Davis with the Staatskapelle Dresden on Decca. It used to be Philips, which has been issued in the Colin Davis Symphony box, and there's a Colin Davis Mozart thin box, and it's been around. It's been around quite a few times. And those performances, they're all wonderful. I mean, the Colin Davis, Staatskapelle Dresden, Mozart recordings are gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And so that's also worth considering. It's also out of print, basically. I mean, it's still in the Colin Davis big symphony box. But, why there isn't anyone with, a brain to keep a catalog, a really fine catalog of the best versions available. It beats me. So Bruno Walter's around. It's in the big Bruno Walter box. You can get it lots of ways, and it's gorgeous. Next we come to number 38, the Prague Symphony. Now, the Prague Symphony only has 3 movements. One of them is the first movement begins with a big, long, slow introduction. A really long, slow introduction. And this was a symphony of a type that we've already talked about. If you've been following the Haydn Symphony Crusade, go back and listen to Haydn Symphony number 25. There you also have a 3-movement symphony that starts with an introduction that's slow, but too big to be an introduction and too short to be an independent movement. And this is something that Beethoven picked up, although not in a 3-movement context. He expanded the symphony and did it in a 4-movement context. For example, the Second Symphony begins with a huge introduction. And of course, the 7th, whose first movement begins with an introduction that's so big and so thematically self-consistent, it really could be almost an independent movement. And so it's interesting to follow the trajectory of this particular type of construction through those early Haydn symphonies, through Mozart's Prague, the Beethoven second and seventh. Something to do if you have some time, if you want to make some comparisons. And my choice for the Prague Symphony is Charles Mackerras with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra on Linz. These are really, really great performances, fabulously well recorded, and they are in period instrument mode, but with modern instruments. I have no period instrument performances on period instruments of these symphonies because, quite frankly, it's not that there aren't any good ones, but it's that there are none that are better, in my view, than the best of the performances on modern instruments. And since this is an ideal list with no weak links, I am not going to pick one because I don't want any weak links. And I think they necessarily would be at least controversial, whereas Mackerras is a great classical stylist, a great Mozartean, and one of the smartest and most musical intelligences that graced the second half of the 20th century. So his Prague Symphony is glorious and thrilling and wonderful, and it has all of the period performance practice stuff that you need to hear to make the music sound different from what all these other people are doing, but still expressive and pointed and musical and gorgeous and wonderful. And what could be wrong with that? And now we're going all the way to the opposite end of the scale for 39, because now we're in the last three symphonies. Now these last three symphonies, 39, 40, and 41, they have a certain mystique because no one knows why Mozart wrote them. No one knows what occasion or when they were performed, although it's almost a certainty that they must have been, because Mozart didn't do anything on spec, basically, at that point in his life. I mean, he did do things on spec. He did. I mean, things like, for example, the string quartets dedicated to Haydn. I mean, there were certain things he did because he felt he must. I mean, the inspiration shook him, and he did them. But these last three symphonies have that aura, and they do make a wonderful group. They make a wonderful group because number 39 is predominantly the symphony with clarinets in the woodwind section. Number 40 is the one without clarinets in the woodwind section, and there's a revised version with clarinets that a lot of people play that replace the oboes with the clarinets. But the tone of the clarinets, the key of E flat major in number 39, really, really, and when I get to E flat major, this may pop up in that other series on symphonies in various keys, but the tone of the clarinets sort of characterizes the whole piece. It does not in number 40. And of course, the Jupiter Symphony also has no clarinets at all and is, the contrapuntal masterpiece that caps the entire series of Mozart symphonies. So yeah, I mean, they go well together as a clump, as a bunch. And for number 39, I pick Klemperer. Yes, Otto Klemperer with the Philharmonia, good old Otto Klemperer. And there are two principal reasons why. The first is that, as everyone knows by now, Klemperer loved woodwinds, and he always balanced the orchestra toward the woodwinds, which is just marvelous in a symphony that takes its entire coloration and raison d'etre from the woodwinds, from the clarinets. So for that reason alone, this is really worth hearing, but also because Klemperer does not play the music too quickly. It's not slow, it's not sluggish, but it's not too fast. And this is particularly important in the finale. The finale should have, especially in its motion music, it's going chung chung cha da da 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 bum 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 ba da 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 da. It's like a German dance, and it has to have that sort of, like I'm doing, that Santa Claus jolly ho 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 ha ha ha. It needs that. It has that kind of jollity. And when you play it the way, like I said, most of these period instrument people do it these days, it's like chung chung chung. It's completely characterless. It's mechanical. It's machine-like. but there's music in here, and there's layers of texture and different rates of motion, and you want to hear all that. And the result of this, when it's done the way the great Otto Klemperer does it, is that it doesn't sound slower. It sounds more exciting and also grander and bigger and more expressively pointed than any of these little pint-sized zippity doodah period things. So Klemperer is my pick for 39. Now 40, the great G minor. Oh God, the great G minor. Da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da. It's just marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. And of course, the finale, which is, Mozart's in the closet. Let him out, let him out, let him out. That's the way you remember that one, by the way. The G minor symphony, the great G minor, beautiful, strings only, no trumpets and drums, a small woodwind section. It has to sing. More than anything else, this music has to sing. It just got to sing. Vocally, that means the violins have to play with richness, with vibrato, with character. The very opening pattern is divided violas. Mozart wanted a certain richness of texture throughout this symphony, and it is so unbelievably exquisitely beautiful. And the performance that to me sings the best, with the most warmth, or one of them. I mean, there's like half a dozen of them. But the one that I keep coming back to is Sándor Vég on Decca. Horribly out of print, I'm sure. Probably very difficult to find. Maybe it's available as a download. Sándor Vég, as I've said a million times in these talks, was one of those amazing musicians who just breathed life into everything he did. It's something Hungarian musicians did very well. Ferenc Fricsay was another one who did something very similar. Everything he played seemed to just have this humanity and vitality. And he did, of course, the complete piano concerti with Andras Schiff, which for the accompaniments alone are fabulous. Whether you like Schiff or not, you got to hear the accompaniments. And he also made on Capriccio an absolutely fantastic box of Mozart's serenades. All of them except for, I think it's the Posthorn or the Haffner. It's one of those that he did for Phillips instead. So it's not in the Capriccio set, but it doesn't matter. These are incredible performances. He was the conductor and music teacher and string guy at the Mozartean in Salzburg, Mozart's own conservatoire type music institute kind of place. And these performances of 40 and 41, frankly, are just magnificent. It is such a moving experience to hear him do this symphony. It's amazing. So, Sándor Vég on Decca, if you can find it, conducting the Camerata Academica des Mozarteums Salzburg. Phenomenal. Finally, we come to the Jupiter, number 41. No one knows why it's called Jupiter. Mozart didn't call it Jupiter. It really is about as sensible as Beethoven's Emperor. I always got them confused. Beethoven wrote the Jupiter Concerto and Mozart the Emperor Symphony. It wouldn't have made any difference. It suggests a certain regal quality, which this symphony truly has. And of course, it has that fantastic contrapuntal finale based on the same tune that we heard back in Haydn's early Symphony No. 13, and the finale there too. Ba-da-da-da. Mozart also used that theme in one of his early Missa Brevises. Missa Breve, or whatever they're called. It's called the Credo Mass, because he used the tune to underline Credo, Credo. I sang it in Glee Club. It goes, In unum Deum Patrem, omnipotentem factorem celi. Never mind. For the Jupiter, there is a classic version, which I must acknowledge, and that is, of course, Zell. Good old George Zell, the wonderful George Zell. Oh, the unbelievable George Zell, who was one of the great Mozart conductors in the history of Mozart conducting. Zell and Cleveland, and whose finale of the Jupiter Symphony is one of the great conducting exhibitions of clarity and balance and exquisite taste allied to energy and vigor and intensity. I mean, it's just like wow, just unbelievably amazing. So it's gotta be Zell for number 41. But of course, there are many other wonderful performances of number 41. And that, my friends, is my ideal list of Mozart's last 6 symphonies. I am really looking forward to seeing yours. And like I said, the one thing I've loved about these ideal talks is that at the end of the day, when we're all done, usually what we have is just an astonishingly fine discography, not just for us and to show off how smart we are, but because people will watch these videos who don't know the music well, who haven't heard it before, who are looking for help and looking for advice and looking for a good conversation about what the best versions are, and we're showing them. And I'm just so proud of that. I'm so proud of you all for participating and helping me to do it. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Go get your Mozart. Take care.